As we come back, who were the guys that were going to do the polar plunge? All right. So Roger, just write down all their names, because what we're going to do instead is we're going to have you guys stand against the wall, and the rest of us are going to throw snowballs at you. Does that sound fun? You good? Yeah. All right, thanks. Well, we're going to dive into talk a little bit about the long period of reconstruction ahead, and the promises that come with that, and then steps 8 and 9, but just coming off, that this whole process of, growing and understanding and effectiveness, as step 10 would tell us, that this is a process that will go on forever. We're all fatally flawed. There's no blue ribbons hanging on any of our walls. And the problem centers in the mind. It always has been. We live in a culture that feeds it, breeds it, puts it on steroids. And so we just need each other as much as ever, no matter how long we've been sober, to keep that at bay, to keep the beast at bay. Because, it's really simple in our life. We got garbage, we bring it in the house, and we put it in the corner. Then the next thing you know, you've got a lot of garbage in the house. And the next thing you know, the house is unlivable. You can't live there any longer. There's nothing wrong with the house. It's the garbage that's in the house. That's the problem. And the inventory in that 4 through 7 and 8 and 9 are all, this is taking the trash out. We're just trying to get the trash out of our house, so we can be free at last, and have some kind of life that's got quality. We can become citizens again, and become, true agents of this message, carrying the message to the alcoholic who still suffers. And this work is really part of that. On page 76, it says, now we need more action, with which we find that faith without works is dead. It's a paragraph or a sentence that comes out of the book of James, and it's mentioned 3 times in our big book, that same verbiage. And, there's only 5 chapters in James, but that's really laying it out. You can talk a big game, but this is where the rubber meets the road. So let's look at steps 8 and 9. And we listed all the persons we had harmed and who we took inventory. We subjected ourselves to drastic self-appraisal. And, what's in the house, what trash needs to be taken out, what narratives need to be, reshaped, reformed, what twisted perceptions and delusions need to be debunked in our life. And there's many, and we need sponsorship to help us do that. And now we go to our fellows to repair the damage done in the past, and we attempt to sweep away the debris which is accumulated, again, the trash illustration, out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. If we haven't the willingness to do this, we ask until it comes. And then this is the kicker, because they already know that you're going to balk at this step. And they're going to come right back and say, remember, now in the beginning when we sat down, you, me, sponsor, you said you were willing to go to any length to do this. Do you remember saying that? Yeah, I remember saying that. Okay, well, we're going to remind you again. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning that you would go to any lengths to have victory over alcohol. I can promise you, sponsored lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of guys, worked with lots and lots and lots of people. I've heard a lot more 4th and 5th steps than I ever have 8th and 9th steps. It's not even close. And the 8th and 9th steps, most of the time that you hear, are mom and dad, a child, a sibling. But we really don't, somehow or another, we push off those other ones a lot of times. My sponsor had me put my 8-step list on 3x5 index cards. And I had a big stack of them with a big fat rubber band around them. He said, I want you to keep them on your desk where you see them every single day of your life. So they pull on you like a magnet. Because if you don't, you won't do them. You'll find out every reason not to do them. You'll escape, you'll come up with alibis. So that was true. Whenever I get a guy with any time that would say, hey, I would like to talk to you about sponsorship, I'd say, all right, well, let's meet, have a cup of coffee, and I want you to bring your 8-step list. And they're like, what? I said, I want you to bring your 8-step list. Well, I don't even know where that's at, yeah, but whatever, they're going to balk at that. I said, I just want you to bring your A-step list. I want to start there. I'm not ready to go back to step one and work through all that stuff again. Let's get what you haven't done that's holding you back to become the guy you want to be. Because I'm fully convinced that if you want the impossible to become possible, if you want to live a storybook life, then you have to do this work. The delusion is I've stayed sober 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and I haven't done this work. So we're not going to come out and say that, hey, it's an 8th and 9th step meeting. Well, I just want to put this on the record that I haven't done all this, and I'm still sober today. So that's all I got. I pass. We're not going to do that, right? You're not going to say that. That's something you're going to keep to yourself because of pride, because of fear, because of the sandwich, right? But really, you need to press on this work. Nobody likes this work. When it comes to this kind of work, it's like the principal calling your name over the thing. Can you send the Featherman boy down here? Your butt cheeks get real tight, You're like, oh, man, well, this is what this is like, right? And so I want to share a little bit of my experience with this, but also experience I've had with other guys that work this. Because there's powerful stories. I can sit here all day and talk about this stuff, these stories. So I had my list. Mama was the first one, my mother. There's no doubt she was the biggest victim in my life. I broke her heart more times than I care to count. And there's still probably an element of shame that still wants to rear its ugly head in my life because of how I treated my mother. Stole from her, robbed from her, did all of it. This, was just a nightmare in her life. And so when I got sober, I hadn't talked to my mom in years. I left home when I was 15. Very casual calls, Merry Christmas, Mom. Most of the time it was some cheap postcard or something. So now I'm sober. My mom was the biggest skeptic of me and my behavior. Huge skeptic. Had a year, Mom. Good for you. Because she's like, yeah, I know in her heart she knows it's not going to last. And but I start this reconciliation process a little bit. And so I called my mom. It was about a year sober. I said, Mom, I'm a year sober. And she said, yeah, I hear you. I'm happy for you, son. I'm glad it's the case. I said, I need to start trying to do some stuff. And I said, I think I need to start with my dad. I said, I haven't talked to my dad in years. I think it would be important for him to know that I'm sober. She goes, well, I think that's a good call. Let me see if I can figure out where he's at. We knew he was in Oklahoma somewhere. And she called me the next day. She says, I need you to come by the house when you get off work. And I came into her house, and I sat down. And she was sobbing. And I knew she was going to tell me my dad was dead. I said, you're going to tell me my dad's dead? She goes, yeah. Yeah, he died in 1986. This is 1988. And I said, how did my dad die? She said, he shot himself. He took his life. And, of course, that was the same guy I had no friction with, right? But I had this great big hole in my soul called a dad. So that was a big deal for me. That was one that really needed to go on my list of people that I never participated in his life, even as an adult. Even as a sober member, I never took time to call him or do it. Now, it took me a year, and I finally reached out to this guy. I said, well, it's too late. He's gone. But he was on my list. Mom was on my list. It was about 3 years sober before my mom would really get, where I knew that she would even be willing to receive any kind of amends from me. But I did. And it changed the dynamics of our life and our relationship. And she was always the biggest winner in my life, but she became by far the biggest winner in my life, Mama Long. And she, I was in the trades. I was making a living. I wasn't making a killing, but I was in the trades. And she goes, I got a proposition for you. I said, yeah. She goes, I think I want you to, I'd like you to quit. I'd like you to put down the tools, and I'd like you to come work for me. She made a pretty good career in the insurance industry. Not on her own. She worked for a major corporation. And I said, Mom, I'm flattered by the invitation that you'd even consider me. But there's no way in hell that corporation is going to hire me. There's no way. She goes, well, let me worry about that. I said, well, you can worry about all you want. I'm just telling you the reality is that they're never, see, this is the narrative that's always been with me, that they're not going to do that. So then she calls me and says, well, I got an interview for you with her boss. So I appease her. I go to the interview. And she goes, and after the interview, she goes, well, I'll get back to your mom. And then the next thing I know, I'm being set up to the next interview with a guy named Jim Dole. And I meet with Jim, and he's very legalistic, by the book, straightforward guy. And I'm, I couldn't wait to get out of that interview. And I just felt like, well, that was that. It was a good little run there for a little bit, I figured. But then the next thing I know, they said, well, we're sending you up to the vice president who became the president of this major corporation. I had to borrow a tie from my neighbor. I didn't own a tie. And it was a clip-on tie, and it only came down about right here. True story. Little brown Hardee's-looking tie. And I show up to this interview. And I sit down with this guy. His name was Art Johnson. And Art was, he was not impressed with me at all. And he was kind of like he was being put out, this whole thing. And I'm sitting there, and he's like, the only reason, it wasn't, hey, welcome, we're glad you're here, we're glad you're sitting here. He's like, I sit down, and he goes, the only reason you're here is because of your mom. I said, yes, sir, I know that. He goes, I love your mom. I have great respect for your mom. It's the only reason you're sitting here. There's nothing about you that impresses me. I mean, this is really how fast, this is like a 5-minute interview. If you work here, I'm not saying I would hire you because there's nothing about you that wants me to hire you, but if you did work here, you're going to do 3 things. You're going to work hard, you're going to work smart, you're going to work honest. Tell me what I just said. I said, if I work here, I'm going to work hard, work smart, work honest. If you don't do one of those 3 things, what's going to happen? I won't work here anymore. That's it. Get out. That was it. And I thought, well, okay, well, that was like great. That's a great interview there. Well, they hired me. They gave me a chance because of that amends with my mom, because of my life starting to become something. And I made the most of it. I went on to have an amazing career with that company, had my own outfit, sold all that at some point. And my mom and I went on to reconcile, and eventually I became the main dude in her life. She had the mother kids, and but through this reconciliation process, through this healing process, through this reconstruction process, Mom and I were just amazing. In 2015, she got diagnosed with long-term or small cell lung cancer, and she lived just a few months at tops. She got diagnosed in July. It wasn't a full diagnosis. It was something wrong with her. She's in ER. But anyway, long story short, she had cancer. When they finally got the diagnosis, she lived 8 days. But when we were in a hospital room, just me and her sitting there, we were good, me and my mom. And I'm sitting with her. She had her hearing aids out. And the doctor comes in, the pulmonary doctor, and he puts his hands behind his back, and he leans back against the wall, and he looks at me. My mom's sitting there in her nightgown, and he said, has anybody been in to talk to you? I said, no. He says, well, your mom's got stage 4 lung cancer. There's nothing we can do about it. And my mom goes, what'd he say? Because she had her hearing aids out. I said, Mom, he said, you got stage 4 lung cancer. There's nothing they can do about it. You tell him I don't want any of that chemo stuff. And I said, Mom, there's nothing they can do about it. And she goes, well, I don't really want to die, but I really don't want to live with that either. She goes, but I'm good either way. Me and God are good. So tell him thanks. Thanks. And he leaves. And then, that night, everybody's in the room. Everybody's in the room. Kids, siblings, everybody's jammed, pre-COVID, everybody's jammed into this little hospital room with my mom, who's pretty much unconscious. And as I browsed the room, I realized I was good with everybody in that room. I'd totally been reconciled with every single person in that room. There was nobody I owed anything to. And most of those people, the younger ones, never knew any of my old life, my own nature at all. And so my mom's last words, we went over, we had a cheap little CD player, and I put in some Frank Sinatra. She loved Frank Sinatra. I put in Frank Sinatra, put the earphones on her head. She opened her eyes for the last time. You could see death in her eyes. And she was startled. I said, Mom, don't worry about it. I said, we're just playing. I just put a little Frank Sinatra for you. And Mom's last words, everybody needs a little blue eyes. So I got a poster in my house with Frank Sinatra says everybody needs a little blue eyes in their life. And that was my mom and my siblings, the people that I just crushed, the people I was vacant from their life, absent from their life. We want you to do the funeral. We want you to do the eulogy. It was a Catholic deal, but we want you to do the eulogy piece, which was quite an honor, given where I was at to this point. Hardest thing I ever had to do in my life was to give my mom's eulogy. But the program made that possible with her. My dad, like I said, I had three half sisters on my dad's side. Same kind of deal on my mom's side. I had never met them. In '93, through the 8-step process, I reached out to them, got connected with them. One of them died when she was 3, so I never knew her, but the 2 were left, Teresa and Debbie. They live one's in Fort Smith, Kansas, one's in Moran, Kansas. But they had the same relationship with my dad. They weren't invited to the funeral. They didn't see him for a long time. And I said, well, we've never met. I said, so what do you think about us meeting, and then we go to our dad's grave together, and we go find this grave, and we just kind of start putting this thing back together. And we loved that. So I met my sisters for the first time ever. And we came here to Pryor, Oklahoma. And we went and found my dad's grave. We also found out we had a little brother who died stillborn. His name, on the tombstone, it said Baby Long. But we sat around that tombstone, and we prayed. You know, we prayed and we reconciled, and my sister Debbie's passed away now. She had an addiction problem. But my sister Teresa's still alive, and still very much a part of her life, her kid's life. They live in Moran, Kansas. And that's just, that's how broken our lives were. But little by little, pieces come back together. I had this stack, and I had a lot of people that my sponsor was adamant need to be on this list that I didn't really feel like belonged on the list. And the reason why is because I didn't do anything to these people. I didn't go rob them. I didn't steal them. I didn't do anything to harm them. I wasn't a cancer in their life. But his press was, were you ever a part of their life? No. And one of them was my dad's brother, Uncle Bob Long. And he's like, well, you need to put him on the list. I said, why? He says, because he's your uncle. I said, yeah, so what? He goes, well, he's your dad's brother. He's the only thing you got left connected to your dad. I said, yeah, so what? I've seen the guy one time when I was like 5. He goes, well, you need to put him on a list. I said, yeah, why? What do I owe this guy? He goes, you're your nephew? Yeah. He goes, you ever call him? No. You ever go see him? No. I never do anything. But here's the delusion. Here's the twisted narrative. Here's the power of thought. If he wanted anything to do with me, he would have reached out to me a long time ago. They don't want me showing back up in their life after all these years. This is my mind. This is the reality of my mind. This is my truth. He goes, you put him on the list. Yes, sir. He went to the bottom every time he came to the top for 12 years. 5 years sober, 10 years sober. I'm getting down to where there's just a small stack left. Seriously, on my little rubber band. Every time Uncle Bob would come, he'd go right to the back. I had no desire to do that. But eventually, I'm in the prison one night. We're doing a prison workshop. We do a lot of workshops in the prison on the steps when we're on this step. And we're talking, and I get honest, and I said, I'm balking a little bit on this Uncle Bob thing. And one of the members on the inside says, hey, dude, when are you going to just shut up and do it? I mean, just like calls me out right in the middle of the meeting. And of course, my mind goes, you know what, I bring this meeting into you. If we didn't have this meeting, you wouldn't even be here. This is what I'm thinking, right? But he had me. I mean, he had me. And on the way home, I'm like, man, I was all wrapped up in that. And I got up the next day, and I had willingness I didn't have the day before, right? And I get on the Google, and I put in Robert Betty Long. Boop! Buffalo, Missouri. It's got to be my Uncle Bob. Has to be my Uncle Bob. Has to be. It's right where they all lived at. So I took out a card, and I wrote a little note, wasn't much bigger than this. I'm reaching out to you. Here's my little biography, a little summary of my life, why I'm reaching out to you, blah, blah, blah. Lick a stamp. We still lick stamps back in those days. Send it off. Not really hoping to get anything, really, just really appeasing this sponsor more than anything. And I get a letter back from my Aunt Betty. And she says, basically, and she called me Little Harold, so I guess that's what my name was, Little Harold. She goes, Little Harold, we got your letter, and it was a joy, and she goes, I still got the card. I should have brought it with me, but it's in my original big book. But I got the card, and then she called me like 2 days later. And she said, is this Little Harold? I said, it is. She goes, this is your Aunt Betty. She goes, I wanted to make sure you got that card. I said, man, I got it. She goes, well, she was just full of joy. She goes, well, somebody just really want, how that made us feel. That was awesome. I said, well, this 9-step stuff that we do in this recovery process, I really need to see you in person. That letter was just a door opener. would it be okay if I came to Buffalo and seen you? And she goes, well, son, I don't know about all that amends stuff, but we would love to see you. You're welcome to come here. So I drove to Buffalo. There's a great promise in this book. Again, we don't have time to get into all that, but it says that 9 times out of 10, the unexpected happens. It's and it's true. If you're properly prepared. When preparation meets opportunity, God does introduction, great things can happen. So I'm prepared for this, and I drive to Buffalo. But like every amends I've ever made, the butt cheeks get tight, the heart starts pounding, and the old narrative tries to sabotage the whole thing for 3 hours. And I'm like, hey, man, thanks for sharing. Go to Staten Island and bother Tommy for a while. Just get out, leave me alone for a while. He can handle it. He's got the stuff. But I get to Buffalo, little town, 3,300 people. I drive down Locust Street, little bitty houses, little one-story ranch home. They have 4-car driveway. There's 3 cars in it. I pull in the driveway. I get out. I look down the street, and there's cars everywhere. I go, damn, there's a lot of cars around this place, man. And I'm nervous wreck. I mean, literally a nervous wreck. And my Aunt Betty comes out. It's summertime. It's June by this time. And my Aunt Betty comes out on the front porch, and she's a little sawed-off firecracker, Southern gal. And she's got a big smile, and she's talking to whoever's behind her. She's looking at me, and she goes, well, he looks like a long. I'm like, well, this is too much. And I walk up there, and she gives me a big old country hug. But then my Uncle Bob comes out. He grabs my hand. He shakes it. He puts his hand on top of it. He looks me right in the eyes. He says, welcome home, son. Now come inside. I got some people I want you to meet. And I walked into his house. Every one of his kids, grandkids, some cousins, and some other people, probably 30 people, were crammed in that kitchen and living room to welcome me back into their life. And 2 emotions were flooding through my veins. One, how awesome a God do we have? How awesome of a program do we have? A process that we have. But the other part of it was just purely disgust with how the root, this disconnection, which been there long before I ever drank, is still rearing its ugly head in my life. This power of Kalo, this power of delusion. I know what's right for me. I know what I need to do. I know how it's going to work. All that has to be smashed, man. And I wish it was just philosophical information. Yeah, that makes sense, I'll do it. No, it's a process of dying to self. Dying to self. The same root of the problem's always been the root of the problem. And so it's like we've never been apart from all those years later, and my Uncle Bob's passed away now. But when I went to the funeral, my Aunt Betty says, you sit right in the front by me, right by me, at his funeral. And the best compliment I probably ever got from anybody in my life, my Aunt Betty whispered to me, she goes, you know what, son? You remind me of your Uncle Bob. Testimony is what this is about. So this is the power of this step. I could go on and on and on and on about those are just some of the bigger ones. But I want to talk about what I started with, and I'm going to pass it to Tommy here in a minute, is the balking of this and why it's important and how this isn't about you. This is really about step 12. This is about you becoming a vessel that God can use to clear out the channel, grow emotionally, spiritually, mentally. It's so you can become the best you can be for God, for the kingdom, for whatever. It's not about you. And why it's about me is when I balk. The minute it becomes about me, I'm not doing it. I'm good. I'm sober. I don't need to do that stuff. I'm not going to dig up bones, use old Randy Travis song. I'm not going to do that. And so we put it off. Or I will do that, but I'm not doing it today. But I'm going to get to it. This is why the guys with long-term sobriety call you for sponsorship is, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to start here. So here's 2 of them. First one was a guy named George. George shows up. He's 10 years sober. He shows up with his 8-step list. He goes, I only got really just one that I've just never done. And he goes, the reason. I said, why haven't you done it? He said, because my sponsor said, except when to do so would injure them or others. So I was probably going to injure this person if I did it, so I haven't done it. I said, what is it? He says, when I was 14, me and a couple guys in Nashville, we forced ourselves on this girl, basically raped her, got arrested, did our time, and moved on. I said, she's been on my list the whole time. I said, well, how come you haven't ever done with it? He said, because my sponsor said it might injure her. I said, okay, well, how are you going to harm this girl more than what you've already done to her? I'm saying I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a moment. I'm going to push back on this. So how are you going to harm this girl more than what you've already done to her? And then, of course, here comes the delusion. Well, what if this, and what if that? I said, hey, that's fair, but I can play the same game. And what if this, and what if that, and what if this? We can do this all day. Pretty good at it. Let's go. Let's just do it. And he said, well, what do you think I should do? I said, number one, I'm going to ask, are you willing to do something? Is there something that could be done? Are you willing? That's all I'm asking. Are you willing to do? I'll do whatever you tell me to do. I said, do you know where she lives? She lives in Paducah, Kentucky. Do you know her full name? Yes, I know her full name. I said, I want you to get her address, and I want you to write a letter to her, and then we'll go over it. We had to tweak it about 7 times, to really get it to what it needed to say. And I said, now I want you to take this letter. I want you to go to the post office. I want you to get it certified mail with a receipt so you know she got it. And if you never hear from her again, you're done. You can mark it off the list. But I said, 9 times out of 10, the unexpected is going to happen. So be prepared for that. So that was on a Tuesday. Friday, he calls me by my initials, always. Hey, HL, what's up, George? She called. I played stupid. Who called? He started laughing. You know who called. And then he started crying. He said, HL, it was incredible. I said, well, how'd it go? She said, George, I got your letter, and this is an answer to prayer from me. I've been praying for you 3 guys my entire life, that something powerful would happen in your life, that your life would turn out okay. You're married, you got a family, you're sober, you got this incredible job. You don't owe me nothing, but this means everything to me. So you don't have to call me no more, you don't need to write me no more. We're good. Thank you for sending this letter. It means the world to me. Changed that guy's life. That guy has never been the same. It elevated him to a level of willingness and service that you've never seen in your life. And he's still rocking and rolling in Wisconsin still today. That's just one example. Another one. Guy named Jerry, 10 years plus sober, comes. I say, hey, man, bring your A-step list. All right, man, I don't know why I need to do that, but all right. Shows up, and I said, I only got 2 left, man, that I can think of, and they're pretty petty. I said, what are they? One's a work comp claim for $750. When I was a juvenile, one of my first jobs at the hospital, I faked a work comp claim, got a check for $750. I said, why haven't you never dealt with that? Oh, man, they're a big corporation. Them people are already gone. They got more money than who knows what to spend. They don't need that damn money. I said, okay, where does it say that? What page is that? I'm looking for that. Right? What page is that on? And he says, all right, that one's easy. But he goes, this next one won't be that easy. And I said, what is it? He goes, it's petty. I'm kind of embarrassed to say it. I said, what is it? He said, well, when I was in high school, we had a gym teacher, old gym teacher, and he made a challenge to us, some of us that smoked. He said, if I know some of you smoke, and any of the ones here that smoke, if you will commit to not smoke, I'll give you $50. He said, me and 3 other guys took his money. Because I probably bought cigarettes with it, but I damn sure didn't quit smoking. And I said, so what's the big deal with that? How come you haven't made that amends? Oh, man, it's $50. It's petty. It's 20 years old, 25 years old. And I said, that's not the point. You missed the whole point of this. This isn't about you. Your real purpose for doing this is to be a maximum service to God and the people in your life. This is to remove the garbage that's still in the house so the house can be everything it needs to be, so the channel can be as clear as it needs to be. This is in the channel. You got to deal with it. And it's the ripple effect. It's the domino effect. Because when you hurt somebody, you don't really know how much you hurt that person. It's a domino. That ripple goes a long ways. You see just a little bit of it. That ripple goes back a long ways. You think you know what harm you've done. You don't even have a clue. You got an idea, but you don't have really a clue. But the same thing happens when you reconcile. The dominoes come back the other direction. And you don't know how God's going to use it, regardless of how petty it is. So he goes, all right, well, I'll call down there, but, and here again, here's all that delusion. But with HIPAA laws and all that stuff, they're not going to tell me who he is. Or he's probably dead already. He was old back then. He's probably retired or lives in a nursing. I mean, he's got all this stuff. And, of course, I said, I can play that game. Just make the damn call. That's all I want you to do. So he calls me the next day. He says, well, I called down there, Festus School District, and I said, I know this is a stretch, but I went to school there 20-plus years ago. I'm looking for this gym teacher. I know you probably can't give me this information, but if you can, I don't even know if he's still alive. I really like to get a hold of this guy. Can you help me with that? And they're laughing. They go, yeah, we can help you, because he's still here. And they go, you're kidding me. He goes, no, he's still here. So he goes down there, and he walks into the guy's office, makes an appointment, sits down with the guy. And the guy, he goes, you probably don't remember, my name's Jerry. I was in your class all these years ago. And you made an offer, a challenge for $50. We quit smoking. I took your money. And he goes, I didn't quit smoking. He goes, do you remember that? And the gym teacher's dying laughing. He goes, yeah, I remember that. It was the last time. It was the first time and the last time I ever did that, you knucklehead. And he reaches in his pocket and pulls out his checkbook. He says, well, I'm here to make that right. And whatever I got to do to get you right with that. And he tells him the whole story why he's there. And he says, Jerry, you can put your checkbook away. But you don't need to pay me nothing. But you're going to make it right with me. He goes, how do you want to make it right with you? He goes, Jerry, that story you just shared with me is unbelievable. It's powerful. What God has done in your life is absolutely incredible. So I'm going to have you come back and share your testimony with the entire student assembly. Not once, but twice. $25 a pop. We're even.
That's great.
Yeah. Now, how many people you think got blessed by that, right? But who knows? And lastly, I'll close with this one. And this is an inside one. This is somebody who was on the inside, who came into prison after doing almost 8 years in prison in a federal. But now the state picked up their case, and now they're in my prison. And they come in right in the middle of this workshop. I mean, right in the middle of where steps 8 and 9 when he shows up. He's on fire. And the first day there, he's like, yeah, well, what are we doing? I said, what do you mean, what are we doing? He says, you can't do this stuff on this side of the fence. I said, really? He's making this declaration to the entire group. We got them all on fire for weeks, and he just shows up and tries to rain on the parade. You can't do that on this side of the fence. I said, really? Well, here's the book. Show me where that's at. Preach, brother. You got the podium. Come on. Lay it on us. Burn us down. And he was pissed. I mean, he was pissed when he left. He was hot. But he was willing. And he goes back, and his brother called. He hadn't seen his mom in years. Well over 5 years. Mom was definitely on the list. And what do I do with that? So his brother called, out of nowhere, his brother calls, hey, Mom wants to come and see you. I'm going to get her down there. We're going to get her a hotel. She's going to stay. She'll be on your visiting list for 2 days coming up. And right after he has this fit. So he knew what he had to do. And he came back and confessed it. She's on my list. I guess I'm going to pull this thing off. Pray for me. He went back, came back the following week to report game changer. The game changer for his life. And you don't know what God's going to do with it, but the cool part about it is he's sitting right there in that Rams hat. That's him sitting right there. That's the power of steps 8 and 9. And he could tell you the rest of the story of where that's led to his life. Storybook life. But it started with that work. It started by getting right with the people in your life. It's important work. A lot of you have balked. I can promise you, you've balked. You got 8-step list hidden, dusted, or you haven't done them at all. Get to work. Find out what God's going to do with it. It's pretty cool. That's all I got.
Don't ever underestimate the power of amends. My name is Tommy T. I'm an alcoholic. So we have that experience in 5, 6, 7. We're riding high. And for me, I think I told you guys I was $138,000 in debt to not good guys. The IRS, credit cards, that was another deal. I'm living on my mother's couch. I've seen the truth of 23 relationships and the guy that I'm in. I'm no dope. I know what this 8-step list is going to look like. And it ain't pretty. I wrote that list. I said, please, God, just show me the people I've harmed. And what I didn't realize, with 96 amends, resentments, and all my family listed on this thing, and those women listed on that 4th step, the book says, we have a list. We made it when we took inventory. And the thumpers will say everybody on that list needs to make an amends. Well, I tried to push back on that right away. I had a kid that I had a resentment for, he punched me in the face in kindergarten. He was a second grader. I said, what do I owe him an amends for? Hurting his hand? You know, I never saw the guy again. So I got a pass on that one. I didn't even know the guy's name, you know. But I was always looking to pick the book apart a little bit when we were going through it. And George just write the list. Write the list. We'll get to the ninth step when we get to the ninth step. Right now we're in 8. So I made a list, and it had an extensive amount of names on it. And what happened was there's so many things attached to non-resentments, not fears, not relationships. I was a big thief. You know, I had no resentment for Wawa food chain, but I stole 40 grand from them. You know, I put an outlet out of business with my talent. You know, there was a lot of things like that, and it was overwhelming. So if you're a guy like me, what do? Fear overwhelms you. You stop. You stop. You balk. That's absolutely right. They know we're going to balk at this. This is a daunting task, and it's really your first task. Do you believe? Is God everything? Is God nothing? What's your choice to be? My choice is he's nothing. He can't help me here. I mean, I'm going to have to talk my way out of this one. I don't know how to do this. And I balk. So what do? I stopped going to that meeting I've been going to for 2.5 months with George. I just don't show up. Don't call him. I just ghost the guy. You know, no cell phones back then, 1997. So I'm just ducking him everywhere I know he's going to be. I know what his meeting schedule is. I'm going to different meetings, and I give you an example. If you're balking, go to beginners meetings. They're great. Tell them you only got 19 months sober and you're in step 8. Oh, slow down. Do 1 step a year. You're rushing this. And you're like, yes, I knew it. I was trying to tell my sponsor that, but you know, he just said go, go, go. And then, you know, then you blame it on George and you slip back into that victimization role again. And fellas, that experience I was having was fleeting and soon lost. I'm going to tell you in less than 10 or 14 days, I don't know how exactly long it was, from balking, the suicide thoughts were back. The thoughts that I'm never going to make this right. I am a piece of garbage. Look at all these things I did. I can never make this right was back on me, and it was back on me on steroids. And I was standing outside this beginners meeting, and a guy, Tommy, he was a postman. He had 30 years sober. No coincidences. I'm sitting here telling this, and he had 30. So he was a little older like me. And he said, hey, Tommy, I heard you doing the 12 steps with George. And I puff out my chest, and I said, well, yes, I am. You know, I'm hanging out with a few of my road dogs, smoking cigarettes. And he said, would you like to speak at St. Mark's Step this weekend? And I said, yeah, I'm good, AA. You know, I'll show up, sure. He says, 15 minutes. We're doing steps 8 and 9. I said, well, Tom, thanks a lot for the invite, but I've done an 8-step list. I just haven't made any amends. The power of God, before my eyes were open, before I woke up, always showed through you guys. And it was crystal clear to me when it did. You spoke to me with the voice of God. He patted me on the back, and he said, make a few amends. Let us know how they turn out. And he walks away. And then my friends say, oh, and we'll be there to see this. So now that fear of being judged, that fear of looking bad, that fear of being a fraud in AA was all over me. And I got to call George. And back then, fellas, it was the dial. It wasn't the cell phone, you know. And I'm praying, let me call George, please let me call George. And I go home and I make that phone call, and that phone receiver weighed a ton to pick it up. I looked at it, I started dialing, I stopped. I mean, it was pitiful what I put myself through. And I finally got George on the phone. Hey, what's up, Tom? I've been praying you'd call. He wasn't disappointed. He just wanted to continue with the work. He enjoyed seeing what he was seeing. He was just good AA. And I said, yeah, I really got to do these amends, George. It's really on me. And he said, come on over, I'm making coffee. Random call, out of the blue, haven't talked to the guy in two weeks. And come over, I'm making coffee. This place is our unfair advantage, fellas. Where do you get that? You know, if I go for a haircut now, I got to use this app called The Cut. I got to make an appointment with this guy. What is that about? You used to be able to just walk in, tell jokes, get your hair cut. Now I got to make an appointment. Right? Might be 3 weeks away. I had a heart condition in the summer last year. Guy says, well, come and see me in November. He's real busy. He's one of the best guys in New York City. I said, I could be dead 4 times, Doc. Well, you know, what's going on? Call a good member in AA in good standing that's trying to help you. Come over. I'll make him coffee. No wait. No app. Random call. That's what we have here. And I am so grateful for what that man did. He didn't berate me on it. He didn't chastise me for balking. He said, it's a scary proposition, but you're going to be with God. Don't worry about it. Let's read the directions. And we read those directions. And then we decided I would start with my family, explain to them the new outlook on life that I have. I didn't even know I had a new outlook on life. George had to remind me I had a new outlook on life. And I was slipping into my old outlook on life. And we went out and wrote down things, and he gave me a very anal, retentive approach. I had like a card that had the approach on it. I was very mechanical in my first approaches, you know, just legalistic, dogmatic, whatever you want to call it. Robotic, I think would be the way that I said it. But I started with Mom. I remember I had those 29 resentments for Mom for never saving me and never taking me out of that household, right? And I sat with Mom, and Mom her health was declining a little bit. She had MS. She was kind of going into a walker at that point, not quite a wheelchair yet. But I'm living at her house, you know, so it was an easy approach. And we sat down, and I poured out everything that I told you guys, stealing money, physically abusing her. You know, I didn't even think of the lost nights of sleep, you know, because now I know that as a parent. But lost nights of sleep, missed meals, worrying about your son, you know, all those things, seeing him, all the things that I did, getting all the phone calls from the police stations and missing persons and all that stuff. And I sat down and I poured my heart out to her. But then, back then, we had a question. It was mandated. The amend is not, the approach is not done unless you ask this question. And it's a killer. These are the harms I'm clear on. Is there anything else you'd like to tell me that affected you? And my mother said, oh, you left out a bunch. And I'm already crying. She's tearing up. But she says, son, I am so proud of you and what you're doing with this AA thing. You know, no tobacco man has ever gotten sober. It's taken some good men from us. All your uncles, your dad's not doing well. I've been living my life through you these last 18 months. And I see your struggle, and it hurts me. And, but I just want to let you know how proud I am of you. You know? And then she went on to say, I knew you were taking all that money. But if I thought it got you out of this house, even for a night, it was okay, because I was always burdened with guilt that I couldn't protect you better. Moms are a cool place to start, that's for sure. And 29 resentments fell from me that day. And I just fell in love with my mother all over again, you know. It was awesome. And I went to my sister next, and my sister, she's just still in the victim role at age 70 now, and just, you know, there for the grace of God goes I. But that amends was not barn burning in any way, but it definitely healed us a little bit. We became friends again. I tried to help her as much as I could over the years. I still do now. That's healed itself recently again. And but then I had to go to Dad. And I told you I hated Dad, man. And Dad was drinking 3 times a day. He was getting drunk 3 times a day at this point. You know, like he'd have the morning, but you know, he'd open the bar, 10:30, 11 o'clock, he's out of it. He's got to take a little nap. Then he comes back for the afternoon load, takes a little nap, comes back for the evening load. That's my dad's day. So I got to try to catch him at the beginning of a shift, you know. And I do it thank you. And I do it in the bar. And I walk in and I give the pitch, you know. And I'm really trying to be heartfelt with it and all this. And I tell him all the things, you know, how I let him down as a son and lied to him. And I said, Dad, I stole a lot of money from the house and from you. And I don't even know what that looks like. He said, it's $12,664. I have it in my book. Remember, the old guys used to carry a book. They knew exactly what was owed to them. And I said, well, I'm willing to pay that back. And he went, yeah, like I haven't heard that before. He was right. He'd heard it a lot of times before. And I said, no, Dad, I'm going to do that. My sponsor gave me directions, under promise, over pay. So I said, I could do 50 a week, Dad. Would that help? And he said, if I believe, if I see it, I'll believe it. And I agreed to that. And I wasn't working, but I was doing side work, and I was able to do that for a while, $50. And I hope I can come back to him, because I ended up having to switch of sponsors during the event process, and I got some further direction with that. But then I'm going to this meeting. It's Saturday, and I only got about an hour before the meeting, and I wrote a letter to my grandmother. And I went to her wake, but I never went to the burial. I was too burdened with guilt with stealing the money from the woman that loved me the most in my life and took care of me my whole life. I didn't know where she was buried. I knew the section, but I didn't know where. So I pulled my car up, go into this meeting, and fellas, it's about honesty here. I was not having an experience with this at this point. I was not feeling connected to God at this point. I wanted to make another amends to look good in that 15-minute talk in front of my friends. That was my motive. I mean, it's just, but we don't know what God's going to do with us in this process. So I got the letter in my pocket. It's a bright, sunny day. I get out. There's a lot of people in the cemetery that day for whatever reason. And I'm walking the aisles of reading headstones, and I can't find it. And I walk the whole section. I'm in the back row, and I look at my watch, and I only got about 40 minutes to get to this meeting and be there a couple minutes early. And I'm like, all right, it'll have to wait. I'll share on the 3 that I made. And I'm walking on dejectedly on a diagonal back to my car through the ranks of the headstones. And when I got up to my car, Anna Taraco was right in front of my passenger door. I had parked right next to her headstone. The hair on my neck stands up. I'm like, all right, well, I still got enough time here, God give me the strength. I stand over her grave. I look at the grave. My eyes start welling up, and pull that letter out. And I can read. I'm a literate guy, and it was brief. My sponsor was very simple with me with this. He didn't allow me to be grandiose and write these college theses on amends and things like this. Just get to the facts. So it was something to the effect of, Grandma, I'm so sorry that when you left this earth, that you saw the kid that I had become. You've done everything for me in my life, and I spit in your face and lied to you. I did steal that money, and I was never really a good grandson, and I caused you a lot of pain. I don't even know what that looks like, but I'm sorry. I know you can see me, and I'm doing better, and I know through your faith you can hear me, and I'm praying every day to do better. I love you, and you will never leave me. And my grandmother was my higher power for those beginnings. That was my concept of a higher power. Fellas, I couldn't read that letter. I started snot bubbling crying, like bad. People in the cemetery were like, what's going on over there? And I'm like, I'm in a tank top. I'm pumped up from the gym. Not like you see me now, And I was just, oh my God. And I don't remember. It was like a sober blackout. I don't remember walking in my car. I don't remember driving to that meeting. And to this day, I can't tell you what I shared at that meeting. I had a beeper. We had beepers back then. And I had it on the thing, and I did 15 minutes on amends. What I do remember very clearly is about 4 or 5 of those guys that were with me at the meeting Thursday night went to that meeting just to see that I'd fall on my face. And they came over, and they said, whatever you're doing with George, don't stop, man. You just sound and look different. So in hindsight, my whole recovery through these 12 steps and all, and through you guys, has been in hindsight. I don't see it when it's happening. I didn't see that for the dramatic event it was. But I think that in the book, it points to me where my outlook on life really started to change. And I caught fire for this. I caught fire for this program. You mentioned we at the beginning, we agreed to go to any lengths to be over alcohol. That's on page 76. On page 79, it says, remember at the beginning, now we're in amends, we've agreed to have to go to any lengths to have a spiritual experience. I think that's where my spiritual experience started. In hindsight, I can see that. I didn't see it when it was happening. But I go on a tear making amends. I got a big list, right? But now I'm running everyone by George, and I'm praying the 7-step prayer before I make my approach. I'm making these robotic approaches, and I'm killing it. I mean, it was so bad in Staten Island AA. They were like, Taraco's making amends, hide. You know, like I'm pulling people out of meetings for anything, you know, like everything I got on my list. I'm just going to town on it. And I'm doing it because it's making me feel better. I don't know that. So I make an amends to a guy, our Staten Island big book thumper, the guy that started the first real step study meeting on Staten Island. He had questioned me one time on my experience because you could ask questions in the meeting, and I stopped going to that meeting. You know, my sponsor had to remind me of, don't let the ugliness of one of the trees spoil the beauty of the forest. I hated this guy. You know, he was just such an arrogant thumper. And I was so weak in my recovery that he really got me. That's what it was about. So I had that thing, and I said to him, Larry, these are the harms I'm clear on. Is there anything that you'd like me to do? And he said to me, how about meaning it when you make amends? You sound like a robot. You don't talk in 1939 language. I've known you for a few years. I was like, oof. That changed the direction of my amends. From that day, say I was 30 amends in at that point. From that amends on, they really became amends or approaches of depth and weight. They were heartfelt conversations. I prayerfully thought, I didn't just say the 7-step prayer as I was going to ring the doorbell. I sat with it, I meditated with it, I spoke to my sponsor about it, and the amends process for me really became meaningful. And there were some tough ones on there. You know, George, just to get me through that list, he allowed me 3 lists. I'm willing. I think at some point I'll get there, meaning when I have the money. And the third one was an ex-wife, who I was still delusional, thinking she wasn't letting me see my son, and I'm sober 2 years now. You know, that's the never. I'm never going to her. I was still using the C word in my head. That's not happening. You know? And so I go out there and I'm making these approaches. I'm doing good. I'm feeling good. Guy asks me if I could sponsor him. I'm like, oh, I got me a pigeon. I knew the language. I got a pigeon now. You know, I'm going at it. It might have been you, Sal. I don't know. It might have been. It's one of those guys. And I'm doing this deal. And George, he had such a corny way of doing things. He said to me, and now we've moved on to steps 10, 11, and 12 in the book with George as I'm making these amends. And he says, Tommy, don't you have an amends to make to the Department of Education? Wasn't on my list, George. But yeah, I guess there was some harms caused there. And I said, I would really, you know, I'm in court trying to get that job back with the unions and stuff. I'd really like for that case to be settled before I go. And corny George, man, he just says to me, oh, so you'd like to manipulate that outcome, manage that yourself, and fail again? Might I suggest putting it in God's hands? You know, like, well, come on, man. Devoid from my fears, he saw things the way they should have been seen. I didn't see it that way. I thought I wanted to get the job back, then I'll make the amends and see what they do with me, you know. So he gives me directions. He suggested that I just go, put my suit on, and sit and wait for the boss to come in. And so I'm here on the ladder. I was an engineer in the boiler room at a high school. I go to see the chief executive officer of the Department of School Facilities for the New York City school system. Guy runs, back then it was about 1,400 buildings. Probably he's got, I don't know, 18,000 employees. And I'm one of the worst ones, you know, so I show up at his office in my one suit, you know, you got that one suit, doesn't fit quite right. I had a tie, I was a little ahead of Harold in that thing. My tie was the correct length.
Bragger.
Yeah, I brag. But I got there at 7 o'clock, and I sat in the waiting room. Now, I don't know the boss's start at 10, and I am in my head in here. You can't pray enough to quiet this head. I'm like, oh, there's the plate glass window he's going to throw me through. I mean, I got worst case scenario. He's going to fire me again. Like, you know, this is what's going on in my head. Or maybe he'll beat me up. I don't know. That's where, you know, Bill says, 9 out of 10 times the unexpected. I would love, you ever hear those? If you could go back in time and talk to anyone who's passed on, who would it be? Mine would be Bill Wilson. I'd say, Bill, did you ever make an amends? I've never heard one of your amends stories. You'd think you would hear that all the time that you did the talking. You would hear an amends story here. Lois would talk about how good you were with amends. I've never heard that. You say 9 out of 10, Bill? My experience was 10 out of 10. My mind will take me to the worst case scenario in every one of them, and that fear will keep me from making it. I just went. Blind faith to God, maybe it was starting, but to George. And I went and I sat there, and here comes this big guy, and I mean, he's like 6'6", glasses like I'm wearing now, a little older than I am. He comes walking in with his swagger and his coffee, and I said, Mr. Lonigan, Tom Taracco, you got a minute to possibly squeeze me in? And he said, Tom T. He says, I got your case on my desk. Come on in. Guy's got 18,000 employees. You got my case on the desk? What am I, John Dillinger or something? Like, wait a minute. It was, a while ago. And he said, what's going on, man? What are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm coming up on 2 years sober, and I started doing these 12 steps. I mean, it was made clear to me by my sponsor, I've caused some harms here. I just want to see if I could talk to you about that and tell you my faults, and if there's any way I could make it to right. And he said, well, Tommy, listen, I am not the arbiter of your case. I'm not making the decision there. It's with the attorneys. I said, it's not about that, Jim. I just want to tell you the guy that I've been for these 17 years. I've worked for you. And he said, yeah, sure. What do you got? And I said, well, when I was in here 6 months ago and had an interview about the arrest, I lied to you about everything but my name. And he goes, really? That's interesting. And I said, yeah, no, it was my gun. That was my third DWI, but I've gotten away with much more than that. I probably should have 50 of those. And I said, and they were my drugs in the back. I got a problem with drugs and alcohol that I just can't shake. But I'm sober about 20 months now, and I'm doing these steps. And I said, that comes along with a thing they call sponsor. And he told me, I have to tell you everything. I said, I have not been a good employee over 17 years. I said, I've had parties in the New York City schools. I've brought prostitutes into the New York City schools. I kept them downstairs, Jim. I didn't bring them upstairs with the kids. I've stolen tools. I've stolen equipment. I've stolen time. I've been drunk on the job in an elementary school. I have not been the best employee, Jim, and that's saying it very lightly. And there's other things I'm doing I'm probably leaving out. And he said, I'm a deacon. Fellas, I didn't know. I am not Harold. I don't have that background. I don't know what a deacon is. And I'm sitting, there's no Google. There's no cell phones. I'm lost. I don't know what to do. So I'm sitting there, and well, maybe he'll say something that'll give it away, And I said, that's interesting. And he said, yeah, I do service in a church. I said, oh, okay, religious guy. Now I'm a little nervous. And he said, we don't find God because things are good. He said, mine was alcohol too. But I went to the Catholic Church. I haven't had a drink in about 6 years. He said, I know what it takes for you to come up here and say this with your job on the line. And he said, but I don't have anything to do with the outcome. I said, well, Jim, if I have an opportunity, if there's anything I can do to make this right. He said, I'll tell you what. If you do get your job back, you come back here. I'll tell you exactly what you can do. He said, but I wish you luck. Stay the course you're on. It's a good one. It's a lot better than the one you were on. Shakes my hand, gave me a little pat on the shoulder, and I walked out of there. I don't even think I walked out of there, fellas. I was on a hoverboard. Mr. Spiritual. I was like, and it was that day that I didn't care if I got the job back anymore. I just knew I'm starting to do the right thing here. I'm becoming honest, and it was foreign to me. And we're going along. And my case had been stalled for months, And I don't know if Jimmy behind the scenes had anything to do with this, but less than 10 days after that amends, I get a registered letter at the house, and they're willing to hear my case. So I freak out. Now all of a sudden I want the job back, right? I'm starting to manipulate stuff, and I called George. And he says, well, listen, you got to put together an AA file. Prepare for this. I said, well, what's an AA file? He said, Tommy, you have so many signatures and completion certificates from programs. Put them all in a file. He says, I'm going to write you a letter. You're going to get the guy that you're sponsoring to write a letter and have your home group sign something. Show them that you're serious about Alcoholics Anonymous. So in that time, I celebrate 2 years. So it was in April of 97 that this occurred. And I got my 2-year chip. He said, you bring that 2-year chip with this, my sponsor's direction to go into this court case. He says, you bring your 2-year chip with you, you get nervous, you put your hand in your pocket and you rub that chip and you know what you're about. He said, that's what you do for a living. This is who you are. That stayed with me the rest of my life. You know, your job, we all freak out about our jobs. That's what you do for a living. That's what God has you to do. He's blessed you to do to take care of your family. You're an alcoholic first. And that's what that did for me that day. But I gave him the folder. I sat there. And fellas, those of you that have been in court, and that's probably 3/4 of the room at least, these attorneys, I can tell you, have never heard testimony from a guy that's in the amends process. I was so honest, it was even shocking me what was coming out of my mouth. I'm sitting there, I'm prayed up, and I'm sitting there, and a calm came over me when I was sitting there. They grilled me for 2 hours on all nuance questions about the night of the arrest, and then they dug up my previous arrests, and they were asking me about them. And I was sitting there saying, I have an allergy to alcohol. When I start drinking, I black out. I don't have those details for you. But I'm assuming that was my gun. I don't remember putting it in my belt, but yeah, it was mine. No, the drugs. No, I didn't have an intent to sell them. It was payday. You can check your calendar. I buy in bulk. You know, like, I don't want to go back out. Once I settle in, I'm good, you know. And these are the kind of answers I'm giving them. And they're turning their heads sideways. They're looking at each other. It was bizarre, you know. And they said to me, Mr. Track, we have one more question for you. And they said, are you telling us that you have not ingested any alcohol or drugs since April 8th, 1995? And now my sponsor gave me this to say, I'm not this sharp. And I said, listen, I would like to thank you very much for just hearing this. It's been a long time now. And I said, thank you very much. And then I said, you know, you can take the job or do what you want with that. I'm okay with the outcome here today. I really am. But there's 2 things I'm not willing to give to you. And they said, what's that? They thought I was going to be a wise ass. And I said, my sobriety. And I pulled out the chip. And they said, what is that? And I said, this is my 2-year coin I just celebrated last week at my home group. And I'm not willing to give you my sobriety. And they said, that's interesting. With that, the arbiter gives me a wink. Like, you know, I don't know if he was one of us or if he was sweet on me, but I don't really care. You know, it doesn't matter to me. It worked. I was a good-looking guy back then, so, you know, I don't care. But then I said, but the other thing is my integrity, and Alcoholics Anonymous has given that back to me. And they said, okay. 5 minutes, fellas, they came back with a verdict. And they came back out, and the verdict was driven by AA. It was not driven by my testimony. Well, they did say, we're impressed with your honesty today and your willingness to answer our questions, every question we asked. And we were impressed that you've showed up for everything that we've asked you to do over the time. There was a lot of hoops to jump through, a lot of process things I had to do. And they said, but we were most impressed with your work in Alcoholics Anonymous and your membership in Alcoholics Anonymous. The fact that you're willing to help other men, that you're actively pursuing these 12 steps and all this stuff, that whatever that is, but a spiritual way of life. It's very impressive, you know. So, you know, what we're going to do is we're going to give you that union job back. So that's what we were asking for. Could I get back into the boiler rooms, you know? And they said, but if you stay clean for a year and can prove that to us, to our satisfaction, we're going to give you the right to that promotion. Because that's how they found out about me. I put in for a promotion, put all the arrests down, and it all blew up in my face. And then they said, and we're going to award you $17,000 back pay. I mean, I can't even, I don't even want to laugh on the stand, but I'm like, in amends, money doesn't flow this way. This is not how this works, you know? And I couldn't run down to the payphone fast enough to tell George what had happened. And you know what George said? I figured that would happen. And fellas, I've heard hundreds of stories in the last 28 years that has happened. You just got to set aside those fears and go do it. And I'm going through things. So what happens after that? There's a lot of things. I make an amends to that ex-wife, the one that was known. Oh, well, first of all, I'm in court for that as well. And after trying to protect my money and protect all my integrity in the court and make her the bad guy in court, this court case is dragging out for years. And I'm just saying, she won't let me see my kid. I'm not saying I'm not paying the back support. I started to pay some arrears doing this stuff. And my lawyer's fighting it the way I told them to fight it. And all of a sudden I stood up and I said to Your Honor, whatever you need me to do to see this boy, I'll do. You want me to pay for the counseling? You want it to be supervised visits? I'll do it. My attorney's trying to pull me back down. And enough with you. I'm sorry. I just want to get this done with. And the judge said, that's the first time in a year and a half in my courtroom that you sound like a father. He said, you're going to see your son. Well, we just got to make sure it's okay with him. And that it's less than a month later, I got a big picture, the school photo of my son at 9 years old with a letter saying, I can't wait to meet your dad. It's an amazing thing. And supervised visits one. My wife came the first one, and she saw how good me and my son were getting along, and she said, I don't have to come anymore. So, fast forward a little bit there. My son runs away a little bit, gets lost one night at 10 years old, smoking cigarettes at a Dunkin' Donuts late at night. He got a lot more than just good looks from me, fellas. He's 12 years sober now with us, but and we're worried out of our minds. She's already on to the next relationship. He's at the house. I go down there with, the central office. We've got the cops calling us. We've got people looking for him, and we're doing all that stuff. They find him at 2 o'clock in the morning. They bring him home. And I was so happy to see him. And I just looked at her then fiance, and I said, Ben, you mind if I talk to my wife for a second, my ex-wife? And he said, no, go ahead. And I brought her in the kitchen, and I said, hon, I was not a good husband. And I just want to do whatever I can to clear that up. And I said, I was never there for you. I never stood up financially for you. I lied to you all the time about my drinking. I didn't realize the problem I had when we got married, or I was trying to stuff it down. I said, that last binge I went out on, I stole all the wedding money. And we were only together 8 weeks, fellas. I didn't do a husband thing very well. And when I went out on that last binge, I grabbed like $4,800 in gifts, the cash that was there, and I just went out until it ran out. It lasted me about 5-6 days. And she said, oh my God, she busted down crying. And she said, you told me I lost that, and I believed it. I never forgave myself for that. And I said, no. Your only problem was you married an alcoholic. We hugged. We never became best friends, but we became best parents. Mm-hmm. We started parenting that kid in a way that, if he was punished during the week at her house, he'd be punished at my house. I never badmouthed her. My son, maybe at about 14, 15 years old, said to me, Dad, why is it you let her rip into you that way and you never go back at her? And my sponsor gave me this line. Son, it's not about me and your mom anymore. It hasn't been for a long time. It's about me and you. And he always brings that up. He's 40 now. He's my best friend now. Sober in AA for 12 years. Things get healed. You never know what this is going to look like. Never. As we're going through that, I go back up and see Jim. And and I said, Jim, I got my job back. He said, I heard, man. Good for you. Good for you. I said, so what is it that you'd like me to do? He said, I got a list. He said, based on what you told me when you were here some months ago, he said, I expect you to do in the Department of Ed what you do in AA. I want you to mentor young men in the boiler room. I want you to help guys along the way. All those hours and things you stole from us, I want you to give them back one day at a time. I want you to come in early. I want you to work through your lunch hour if you do, if you have to. I want you to stay a little later if you have to. I want you to work hard and honest. I said, I can do that, Jim. And I went back to that job, a job that at one point I hated and thought every boss wasn't seeing my true talent, with a new lust for it. And I started studying engineering, and I started working real hard, and I got a great reputation on the job. And you know, the funny thing, fellas, if you're in city government work, it's not hard to be employee of the month every year, every month. You know, you just got to basically show up and work, and you're a good guy. But I was taking it next level, as we do, studying, getting licenses, doing all this stuff. And so a job promotion comes up only about 2 years later, and I say, well, why not? You know, and I fill it out again. I've already gone through all the HR stuff, right? But who's determining that? Who gets that job? It's Jim. And the job was an inspection job, and it was to be involved with the mob in New York City in concrete and construction work. I get up against a guy that's got 19 years or 17 years of seniority. I got 17 years, right? This guy has a squeaky clean record. No arrests. I got 6, right? He's got 22 engineering licenses. I have the same 22 engineering licenses. They bring him to Jim and they say, well, here's the 2 top candidates, but it's pretty clear. This guy he's clean. He's been, nose to the grindstone. He's good. And Jimmy looks at it. He says, well, maybe not for this job. He says, I'll tell you what, give it to Taracco. If he takes any money he'll drink, we'll know right away. And not only did I get that, but that put me on Jim's team. Jim started to use me as his go-to guy. We could talk about alcohol together. We talk about our wives together. Well, my girlfriend, his wife. We could talk about our kids together. Could talk about the spiritual life together. And he just trusted me to do everything with. So I became that problem solver for him. If he had a tough school, a custodian engineer not acting, Tom, go out and have a conversation with him. I think he needs your help. Our 12-stepping guys. I'm doing this. He trusted me. Whole new experience for me, fellas, to be trusted. And I paid that back, just like I paid back my sponsor. I told you guys, shared you when we opened up. I wasn't nervous coming here to talk to you guys. I'm nervous sitting next to this guy. I'm nervous because I don't want to let him down. He puts a lot of time into me. He's got expectations for me whether he knows it or not. But I got higher expectations for me. And that's what I had with Jim. I just worked my ass off and just kept my head down, kept doing AA and kept doing my job. Jim retires 24 years ago or whatever. They gave me Jim's job. I was running the largest school system in New York, in the world, really. And how did that happen? How does this happen to us? Make those amends. Make all those amends. You don't know which one's going to set you free and others free. There's no way. You don't have a crystal ball. We've stopped playing God. Just do it. Just do it. Don't settle, fellas. Don't settle. I have made many, many more amends since then, and unfortunately, many when I've been sober. They're easier when you were drunk. At least I can blame being an asshole and a drunkard on that. Now I'm 27 years sober, and I'm here to try to make things right. That's a rough conversation. But you want to stop being a liar? Make 100 or so amends at how dishonest you are. You want to get better as a man in your relationships? Look into 23 women's eyes and tell them what a piece of shit you are. And then have them pile on. That's tough. But it's the truth. You got to see the truth before you can change it. Don't sell yourself short, fellas. This amends process is amazing. Amazing. I don't owe anybody money right now. Mortgages paid, no credit card bills, no mobsters looking for me. I can sit in a restaurant even with my back to the door. It's an amazing feeling. I walk into a room. My sponsor used to give me I'll give you this one thing and then I'll close. I'd go to him and say, I think there's something wrong here. I don't know the harm I've caused with this guy, but something's different with our relationship. And he said, well, then do an ask. And I said, what do you mean? He said, is he a friend of yours? Approach him and ask him, have I done anything to harm you? I seem like there's a little distance here. And you know what it's been most of the time? Sometimes they would tell me, yeah, well, that comment you made at the meeting, I don't even realize it, right? But I'm willing to clean it up. But a lot of the times what it proves to me, and I need this proven to me all the time, it ain't all about me. They got something going on in their lives, and that's why our relationship is a little distant. They've confided in me, well, I've been doing some behavior I don't want to talk to you about, especially you about. It ain't all about us, like Harold said. It's about the other people. This process is just amazing. I am not afraid to clear up any wreckage I have, and I still have wreckage, unfortunately. But the one thing that God's allowed me to do over these last, 10, 15 years, is I make that amends quicker. Because the only one I'm punishing is myself. Because I will sit in it, I will roll in it. I'm like a pig in slop for an Oklahoma acronym there, right? For something you guys can understand. And it is just, I will pout in it. I will build it up to be bigger than it is. It only gets worse. So especially around my home and our 10th and 11th step, which will be tomorrow's session, I'll sit in it for a little bit, but then I go clean that up. Because I want to keep this slate clean. And I don't want to cause any more harm, but unfortunately I do. We'll never get perfect at this, but if we remain willing, you're going to have a life that you don't even imagine. You can't imagine it. I know I never saw this coming. Thanks.
Yeah.